Hello, and welcome everyone for Build on Serverless episode number 2. This time we've got our featured guest, Mike Morain.
Hey, Edward, how's it going?
Really good. Kind of stressed a little bit.
Yeah, I know. It's been a good day prepping. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. So.
No problem. Actually, my pleasure.
Yeah.
For those of you who are coming to the show for the first time, this is a series that we're going to build a serverless airline, the MVP, which is a web app that we're going to be showing on the screen right now. So the idea of this project is essentially that you not only watch us to build and help us to build the whole project, but also learn how to use AWS tools, the latest and greatest, and even better, after you learn how to prototype really fast, you've got to learn how to use some best practices. Sometimes you need to switch tools, sometimes you need to refactor a few decisions you made early on. That's the whole point of the show. It's not to build something extremely perfect, extremely featureful, but more to show you the whole process of building something on AWS, prototyping, and best practices.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So the page I'm showing you right now, in case you haven't seen that yet, that page contains the whole schedule, depending on where you're from. And today we're going to build a catalog service, which is the first part of the backend that we're going to do. For those who watched episode number 1, the PR has been already merged. I also fixed the issue I couldn't fix on live for the last time. It was such a silly thing. It was actually just missing a key. It was something wrong with the docs as well, but I made a PR. Hopefully it's going to be merged soon. Excellent. And also, before we start again, the episode number 2 here's the link for the bonus episode. If you don't add anything, I will add some comments on ideas I particularly have for the bonus episode. The idea for the bonus episode is there may be areas we cannot build in only 1 hour, or maybe we missed something you would like to see more. Maybe you'd like to see more of CDK. Maybe you'd like to see more of Amplify and SAM together, or more Lambda, or a more complete booking pipeline. Anything that you have in your mind, please add in there and we react to +1.
And also, just before we get started, I'll be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions along the way, or if you want to help us out, if we get stuck, let us know. And we'll try to answer them as we go along.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, this is live, which means if you get stuck, this becomes a live Stack Overflow, which means you can help us out on the chat, trying to get us unstuck out of this.
Exactly.
So here's what we're going to do. If you can see it, let me know if I need to increase my font size or if the audio isn't there. We can fix these pieces as we go along. So recap, we kind of did it. We did Cognito, is on the PR. You can check it out. I'm going to do a demo really quick, and I'll show you the GitHub in a minute. What we're going to do is we will introduce continuous deployment. Everything we did on the first episode was just using Amplify push to make any changes. That's good, but what if I want to do a git push? What if Mike creates a new branch and start working on that feature? Can we use feature branch? It just doesn't make sense to keep adding git push, Amplify push pretty much everywhere. Even though you need in some part of the process, it's nice to have a proper build and it fails if something goes wrong. So that's the whole purpose of this. We're gonna walk through DNS, atomic deployments, and all of that stuff that if you ever build front-end and back-end on AWS and trying to put in a pipeline, you know what I mean by not having atomic deployments. So we're going to show you how now, which is so much quicker. And then we go through the catalog service, we build the schema out, and we build that from scratch, and it kind of shows you a little bit of GraphQL introduction, and it helps if you don't really know much about it. We're not going to go super deep to all the GraphQL features. We're going to progressively go and take you on that journey instead of trying to overwhelm you with lots of information. Cool. So let's get to it.
Yeah, let's jump in.
All right. So the airline, I'm just gonna switch from this. So the airline.serverless.dev should be up now. Let's check. Yeah, and you can sign up with your own user, or you can just use demo lowercase, capital D, demo 123 exclamation mark. Again, you can sign up for your own user, and I can check it out. So basically, the app itself, we're gonna do this part here. If I search for a particular flight in a particular place, I'm actually using mock data right now. So I want to start adding some flights in here and filtering some of those flights. We're gonna build the backend for this right now before we go on the next episode and build the booking. If you are interested in actually going to the repo in case you're also new, this is the repo you should get going. AWS Samples Serverless Airline Booking. Easy peasy. What do we do first? The first thing we do is we go to a service called Amplify Console. Because it takes a while for DNS to propagate and do all those changes and such, I've already done it. So once you go to Amplify Console, or if you click on Services and look for Amplify, if I can type. Once you click in here, you're going to see something like this, where you can connect an app. Once you click in Connect App, you can select where the particular GitHub is. If it's a front end, you likely automatically find out if it's a React, a Vue.js, Gatsby, Jekyll, Hugo, pretty much almost anything. And once you select a repo, for instance, let's say Unicorn Trivial Workshop, I can select the branches I want, and once I select that, what happens here is it automatically finds out if there's a build for me. Because this is not the best example in the world to show you. If I was using a Vue.js or something, it would also show me npm build, npm run CI, and things like this. It automatically creates a build spec for me, so I don't have to do it. But it doesn't stop me for actually overwriting this, downloading this, and finding out what framework it is. If I click next, that's going to go ahead and deploy, but I don't want that. Here's the one that I just deployed. The serverless airline is connected to my fork of the GitHub, and you can see that this already has been deployed. So every time I do a git push, it does a provision infrastructure for me. If I'm running backend and frontend in the same repo, it finds that out for you as well. And it does the build, the test, everything we possibly want. So no real magic here.
Yeah, the other thing that is really cool about the Amplify console is, as Heitor was saying earlier, if you want to have different branches for different developers, you can go ahead and connect up additional branches, and it'll spawn environments for each developer. So you can have those feature branches and kind of work on your own thing without stepping on each other's toes.
Exactly. Actually, why don't we just do that?
Yeah.
So let's just create a simple branch, a copy of Twitch branch, just to kind of get a feeling of what that looks like now. So actually, let me open up my own terminal. So let me just create a new, let's say Mike. I create a new Mike in here, and I just do a push oranging Mike, and essentially, I should be able to, it should take maybe a few seconds. Let's say create connect branch. And if I click in here, it should be able to see Mike. Once I click Mike, ideally I should be able to do amplify, init, and fail my deployments, etc. But let's carry on with that. So if I just do next afterwards, essentially just review that piece for me. And I can maybe just my ad blocker right now playing with me live. If I just do a save and deploy, that creates the whole pipeline again for me, but per branch, which means it just kind of clone everything and just kind of work exactly as I wanted to. Let's go back in here, and I want to go back to Twitch just in case. One nice little feature about this, once it goes to deploy, it's my favorite feature of it, apart from making it so easier to start with, is it has atomic deployments built in. But why do you ask? If you're doing a single page application like we're doing, once you create a build for this, it creates a single index.html and everything else hashed, which is great. But from a caching layer perspective, you are caching index.html. So in the previous way, if you're using CloudFront and S3 yourself, what you would have to do was to invalidate the index.html yourself from the CloudFront distribution, or just use some more advanced features in S3 with version objects and things like that. This handles all of that for you, and you don't have to do anything. The next feature that makes sense for us in our case was I needed to have a domain. So I didn't want to use this auto-generated Twitch, the branch name, the CloudFront, etc., etc. So you basically can connect your Route 53 domain in here. And what you can actually do is you can start adding other pieces and connect to different branches that we have. So essentially, you don't even have to go to Route 53 and start configuring those. You can create a CNAME, well, a new .dev, whatever, to a particular branch. That makes development so much faster.
Yeah. Then I can have my own DNS name as well, and we can really move fast without each other stepping on each other's toes.
Exactly.
There's actually a decent question from the Amplify, about the Amplify CLI and console. C2TA Run asks, is pushing the Amplify folder that gets created by Amplify CLI safe? And by safe, he's wondering, are the AWS account credentials saved anywhere, or is it safe to push to a repo?
Why don't we just do that now?
Yeah, let's go look at it.
Okay. So first things first, we need to we already done the push. So we also need to start the schema. So one thing that we're going to do is, because we already pushed the project, you have the Amplify files right here. What Amplify does for you when you do an init or when you add a team, for instance, a team workflow, it automatically it updates actually your git ignore. So if you click in here, you're going to see this was actually automatically added for me. One piece you definitely want to avoid is actually to add your exports in there. But pretty much everything else that's not in the ignore is actually safe. If you are working with multiple teams and you have multiple accounts and you happen to be afraid of, you don't want to push the entire team structure for what particular account each of those developers have, then you can add that to this particular file in here if you wanted to. But all the operations that Amplify will have on the CLI, the git ignore is automatically updated for.
Very cool.
All right, so let's start with the first one. First things first, we need to add our API. So the way we do this is we just do, I'm just make sure I have everything here. Yes, I do. So we do Amplify API, which is the category, and then we just do add afterwards. So let me just increase this a little bit more. So once you do this, you should be able to start asking a few questions. Let me increase this in case you can see it. The first question is GraphQL or REST. For now, GraphQL. Later, REST as well. So let's just say the same AWS Serverless Elasticsearch line is the same name of my project. And I don't want to use API keys. API keys are great when you're trying to basically just do metering for a particular user, or if you're just interested in just doing a dev environment. We don't want that. We want to use Cognito user pool for now. So if I do this, it asks me, do I have an annotated schema? I say, well, we actually do, but it actually asks me for a file path. Ideally, you have that in your Git already. What we don't, so we just kind of create that, and Amplify will clone that into a place we need to start making edits afterwards. Let's just do this. So I'm gonna go here, and I'm just gonna create a new file. I'm just gonna create a folder, source backend, and in there, I'm just gonna do schema.graphql. So essentially, what I need to do before I even press enter, please don't leave me press enter. And then it should be just schema.graphql. But before I add enter, it asked me something important in piece of information. It said, do you have an annotated schema? When you do GraphQL, you normally don't have those directives unless you're more advanced in that area. So what annotation means is something like this. Let's say I want to add a new type flight, which is exactly what we're going to do. And then we start adding some attributes, right? We start adding some fields in here. What it means by annotated is something like this, @model. Before we go into here, let's just create a model first, let the CloudFormation go through, because it takes some time, and then we explain to you what these directives are. So I don't remember by heart, there's a lot of fields, so I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I'm just gonna open up the mock that we're already using it, and I'm just gonna copy all the fields that I need for that particular API, the interface, the type. So all I need to do here is this. So I just need to make sure everything is here. So our ticket price is going to be an integer. Our flight number is going to be an integer. And let me see if I'm missing anything else. So departure date should be a string. I can make it as an Amazon ISO 8601, but I'm lazy now, so bear with me.
And we can refactor that later.
We can, yeah. So city is correct, local, date, etc., etc. Looks pretty much okay. So let's save it now, and let's just do an enter now. Pray to the demo gods. Okay, it seems to have worked, but here's the real magic though. If I now do an amplify push, don't worry, we're gonna add all of this to Git and do a push again. You do an amplify push now. Better yet, amplify status. If you follow the episode number 1, you will see that we haven't made any changes to the authentication process. What we have done to the API, it's a new API and therefore is a great. So let's just do this, amplify push. And you said, yes, I want to do this. But there's something even more interesting. He actually copied my schema to a folder that I have to follow. If I don't make changes in here, Amplify would not recognize. That's probably a feature request. I wish from my developer experience, I only change one place and it would mimic or select where I should be changing it. This is a super important question. Do you want to generate client code for this API? Let's see what that means. Say yes. What is the language that you want to generate the code of? I'm not using Flow. I'm not that hipster. TypeScript, I wish for now, but let's continue with JavaScript. And exactly where I want to generate those folders. Usually from my development workflow, I leave it by default, but then I make changes to the queries and mutations in a ways that make more sense to me. So let's do this. Yes, I want to generate everything possible. I don't mind. And what is the maximum depth? I'm going to select 3 now. I will explain to you in the next episode number 3, where you're going to start having nested fields and nested queries and mutations. Here you just ask for 2. We're going to go up to 3 throughout the whole episodes. That's going to take some time now. So let me explain to you piece by piece, and Mike can correct me or add information if I forget.
Yeah.
So what is the model? What does that actually do? So if we go back in here to the Amplify documentation, we go to getting started, you have something, if you look up for GraphQL, the first thing that shows off is the GraphQL transform. I click in here, you should be able to see a simple annotation there for a blog post, and you even see some correlations, which looks like what you normally would want to do a join a SQL database. That's, to me, that's the nicest piece of the GraphQL aspect. And if I just continue to go, there's going to be something called model. This is where I get most of the information, or the meat, or veggie if you're vegetarian. So in here, you're going to be able to see a directive and what exactly you want to create. You don't need to know any of this. But what it does mean is every time you do add model, it will take the type, let's say flight in this case, you will create a DynamoDB flight table and will follow that structure as soon as you start creating attributes or things like that. Not only that, it has, if you want to go crazy on mutations and customizing things, which we're going to do in the next episode, you can even say what you want to get out of the auto-generated create, update, read, and delete. Not only you create AppSync, in this case, will create the DynamoDB table for you and match those attributes once you're about to write. It creates the queries, for instance, get flight, list flights, create flight, update flight, and flight. All of that with filters and best practices you normally would want. For instance, I want to list all the flights that goes for a particular city. All of that is generated for me. So that's what model does.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit of that filtering later, but the auto generation is really, really slick.
Yeah. So let's see what actually goes behind the scenes. Let's see, I think it's X2 creating it. So once that's in place, what changes now in the Amplify configuration folder is the backend folder now has an API. And here you can see a lot of stuff that Amplify CLI did behind the scenes that you don't have to do it. One of my favorite pieces, I always like to break things to know how they work, or I want to know exactly how that would look like in CloudFormation if I had to do all this work on my own. Here's how I can find out all of these internal pieces. Once you click on that backend API, you can see the name of my API, and you have not only the schema that we actually copied first, but we also have the stacks. We also have resolvers, which you're still going to be able to see it. By clicking stack now, I'm going to be able to see the whole piece that CloudFormation will do that for me, for that particular DynamoDB table, for the AppSync API, for resolvers, everything else that you'll normally need in a GraphQL. Better yet, we were discussing the create flight, update flight, and all that stuff. In the resolvers, it creates all of the Apache VTL for me, the velocity templates, which I don't need to write any Lambda function, just for doing the basics. So if I click in mutation create flight, I will be able to see something like this, which basically we will actually put a new item to DynamoDB. If I don't add any ID, which you saw as a field, it will auto-generate one. And then everything else that I pass on from my API, from the GraphQL, it will add as an attribute. So use that as a primary key. Here's a little secret though. If you vote as a bonus episode, we could do something better than that. We could try to follow the Rick's best practice on DynamoDB, and we can do all of that using a single DynamoDB table. Probably that takes more than an hour. It's a challenge. You never know.
Yeah, that would be a good episode. Yeah, let us know if you want to see that.
Awesome. So What also it does for us is the auto generation piece, which is the piece I love the most, which we're gonna use that now in a second. But if I look at the GraphQL folder now, I have the mutations, the queries, the whole schema as a JSON for auto completion and subscriptions. By clicking mutations now, you should be able to see the create flight, and you, despite all of this syntax in here, you probably recognize all of these pieces in here, which is super awesome. I don't even have to do all of this. If I were using TypeScript or Flow, it would even create the types and interfaces, everything I needed, including the queries and so forth. So I will know exactly what the query, what the request and the response would look like with autocomplete. So I talked enough, which is good, and he finished the API
Hey,
right on time. So let's have a look at how this looks like actually in the console. So if you go to the console now, if I go to the app sync, I should be able to see the serverless airline Twitch. So what we do now, if I click in schema, you see that my schema is way longer and actually bigger if I'm trying to do English properly than what I actually wanted. It not only created all the filters for creating a flight, listing, sorting, pagination on DynamoDB, and all that stuff that takes some time, but it also created subscriptions. In GraphQL terms is, let's say if someone creates a flight, any mutation that you do, you can automatically subscribe to that using, that in this case, WebSockets behind the scenes, and you can get the data that has been changed. Not only that, you can even parameterize, which is somewhat advanced in this case, which is not covered in Amplify CLI. You can even do something like on update flight, and you can pass the ID of the flight or flight number, for instance. So if someone is looking at your catalog or in the booking area, if the flight has changed time, you can now notify the user in real time and say, hey, your flight has changed. You should be able to do something now.
That'd be really cool, yeah. Are we going to cover that in a later episode?
Maybe. All right, so how do we do now? Let's do the basics. We need to add a few flights in here, and then we can start integrating that to the front end. So because you don't want me to sit typing every single time, I created a few basic mutations, and I'm going to show you the power of GraphQL when doing a basic query. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. I don't need the seed capacity for now. That's for another episode. So let's actually go back in here. Let me just do this for every one of those. Okay. So let me just do this. Now, if I go to queries, I should be able to add a bunch of mutations in. But I have to log in with user pools. Here's a trick. It took me a while to figure that stuff out. I wasn't sure where was the right place to do, which is something I'm gonna make another PR for the documentation or basically a tutorial. By clicking login with user pools, because I'm not using API keys, it asks me for that user pool client ID, a username, and password. Username we already know. We created a username in the past episode. But where is the client ID? Remember the file that we're saying don't commit that? By clicking Visual Studio Code right now, if I go to source in my source folder, this was generated in my first Amplify init. By clicking here, I have my web client ID in here. And I can go back now and I select this one here. Hopefully that will work. Perfect.
There you go.
The reason for this is because we have Cognito in place, authorization in place, we cannot make queries if we're not authorized. We have to authenticate first. Now I have all of these inputs in here, trying to add a few flights. Let's just add these flights. And let's provide source. Oops. That's new to me. So let me, oh, of course. I need to copy those now. So let's try that now. Now I can add a flat one. Internal error failure. Okay. Okay. Oh wow. Okay. Let's troubleshoot that.
Yeah, let's go look through the sources.
So it doesn't say much in here. So something is wrong between the interface of Apache VTL to talk to Dynamo. Maybe I hit a limit, maybe I hit something else. Let's figure that out. We can enable logs as well. So if I go to data sources, I should be able to see my table called flight table. So let's see that. If I can access my table. So my table is here. I don't see any items. So, well, it's here. If I go to my schema, let's see if let's try to do a basic query to see if that would work. Let's remove all this. And let's just do a basic query, just to see if the engine itself is working. So let's say I want to list all my flights. I get auto completion as well. And as a parameter, I can say limit of 2. I don't have any flights, but still. And in here, the return is going to be a model flight connection, which I don't know what that is yet. It's items, and it returns an array of flights. If I try to do autocomplete now, I can see everything that the flight we added in the schema. So let's say we want the ID, and we also want the departure city, and we also want the arrival city. Let's try that. So the query is working. Maybe there's something wrong in my syntax now. At least it's not the engine itself. So troubleshoot something. At least it's there. So let's go back in here now, and let's try to do a mutation again. So let me just copy this now. Copy one of the mutations. Let's try to troubleshoot that. So remove this now. I'm just gonna do that. So what the mutation should do for us is already complaining. Create flight must have a selection of subfields. So it has an input. Yeah, here we go. And it should have a return. So different from REST, once you're making a query to or a mutation or something to GraphQL endpoint, you have to say what we call selection set, which basically is if you made a change, what do you want back? That's the power of it. The front end controls what they want back for a particular.
So typically your API would define, what you get back. Oftentimes that might just be an ID or the entire object, but that often leads to kind of over polling of information. So that you can specify the exact subset that you need for that particular view that you're generating with that API call. It's one of the best things about GraphQL.
Exactly. So that's if you ever get into an issue called overfetching or underfetching with REST, GraphQL is very likely for you. But it doesn't mean that GraphQL is better than REST. It's just a different way of doing things. So let's try that now. Okay, it worked. So now we got an ID. Let's try to get that flight now. If I can copy this, I cannot. That's no problem. What we're gonna do. We're gonna do that again. We're just gonna do a list flight. Actually, let's cheat. Let's go to Dynamo and see if the item is there. Yes, it's there.
You go.
I'm gonna copy from here, and now I'm gonna run a query specific to that flight. So now I want to see why GraphQL in that scenario is good. So I want to pass that ID. And I want to pass specifically what options I want back. So not only I want the ID, I also want the departure city, the arrival city to see if that matches. What's perfect from here is I can keep going. I can say departure date. I can do anything I want. And I selectively say exactly what I want back. That means I no longer have to do the backend for front end. I have an API that can talk to Dynamo, that can talk to Aurora, a Lambda, a HTTP endpoint, whatever it is. The data source doesn't really care much. What I care is I have a strong contract that I know what the fields are. I know exactly what I want back on my client. And if I have to go and fetch that data from multiple sources, GraphQL would do. Okay, now is the part that it's interesting. Now we need to actually go back and integrate that into the front end. How do we do this? So let's go back and go to our IDE in here. So first things first, all the mutations and queries are here. We need to list all the flights so we can build that list, that particular view, all my flights are there. So what we care is something called list flights, which is what we already did, we already tried. We don't need to make any changes in. What we need to do, if you know Vue.js, but you don't have to know for now, is what we need to do is there's a view that actually has something called flight results. That flight results is where it shows you the whole views of flights. But actually, all the API's calls are not into those view files because I want to abstract as much as possible, make it portable. So what's in there is in store. Remember the first episode, we talked about microservices from the front-end perspective. Not necessarily micro front-ends, but you get what I mean. By clicking catalog, I have the actions. Taking those files is going to be a synchronous piece, so I need to change in there. If I go there now, I have something called fetch flight. If you see this is verbose, it's because it's on purpose. I added documentation for you in case you want to go through and find out how all this is working. Here's a little secret as well. If you just do a npm run docs, you will get a HTML with all those codes already documented. In case you want to take a sneak peek on what's going to happen in the next episode. So if I stop this one here, in the fetch flights, I'm actually taking those flights from the mock. If the text is just too small, let me know. We can just make it larger. What we need to do here, we need to make the call to using GraphQL. So we need to make a call here. And then from here, we need to use Amplify library. So how do we do this? Go back to the documentation. Let's find out. If I go to the documentation here, if I type GraphQL, I'm not going to be able to find one. Let's search for API. Found it. Using GraphQL endpoints. Whether using React, whatever it is, this doesn't matter. What matters is whether using GraphQL client or AppSync SDK. When do you use one over the other? In my humble opinion, that's my personal opinion, Amplify GraphQL client is the easiest way to get started. You don't need to do much. All you need to pass the query and pass the variables. If you need offline, if you need caching behavior, that you're gonna need the Amplify SDK. If you come from an experience field from GraphQL and you know Apollo, you know all these pieces, AppSync SDK is gonna be your main choice. Let's go for the basic ones. It actually tells us to import all of these pieces, but I don't want to import everything. I just want one piece. And here, it's the important piece for me. I need to import the GraphQL operation and the API so I can send the queries and I can start troubleshooting. Am I sending the correct syntax? Am I adding variables? Am I doing all of that? So let's copy this to the very top. And we also need to import our list flights, right? So that's going to be from GraphQL. That's going to be from queries. So let's see if that works. Yes, I can see it. If you can see in here the autocomplete, that's look very much the same what we used on the console, except you have some dollars and some variables. Let's see how we can use that now. So what we do now is go back to the documentation and see how we can use this. It tells us this. Let's copy and paste and try to find out how this works. So this is what we need to do, right? So instead of actually saying all to-dos, let's call this flight data API for now. And what we do here is we're going to pass the query. Let's just say list flights. That by default will actually query that for us. And I can enable debug and such and do a step through debugging, but that's going to take some time. So what we can do here is I think I have the local version running. I don't have to do much. Yeah, I do. So let's do this. I'm just going to go to the version locally and see what the output looks like. I kind of know by knowing GraphQL, but I'll just show you what is your thinking process if you don't know much yet. So let's go to the local host and I log in and I search for any flight. It doesn't matter. Like I said, it's using mock data. So searching here, I go to the console. I should be able to see an array with 4 flights, which is exactly what we were discussing before. Remember that? So that is exactly what we want. We want those flights back so we can start creating those pieces. Better yet, if you install this extension called GraphQL Network, you'll be able to see exactly what the query was. Let's try. You refresh, you see that this was a real query. I had so many challenges of trying to know if it was fixed, was cached, or if it wasn't cached. So use this to know exactly what it is. That may be familiar to you now, and you also can see the computed query that we run, all the items and everything else. So this is the way the response comes back to us, right? We have the data, and we have the name of the operation we run, and the items which you saw from the console. So now you need to help me. I never remember the right syntax to do this structuring. So let's do this. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna create something. So let's say we know that the data comes from data first, and then it has the name of the operation, and then we want the data to be flight data API. Let's change flight data API. Okay, that looks better now. So that means I want to, once I receive the JSON back, I want to look at the key called data. Inside, I look at list flights, and actually that's wrong. I actually should look at items, and then I want to associate this into this. You were supposed to help me. So let's see if that works now. So ideally, we should be able to see the data very clean now. So if we refresh in here, we got another one here. And if I click on items, I only had one flight, which makes sense now, right? And if I click in console, I also, well, it doesn't matter, I guess, right? Because I didn't have console. It doesn't matter. I know it works. So what I need to do now is I need to change from actually getting the data from a mock. I don't need this anymore. And instead of flight data, I just do flight data over here. Let's see if that works. If it works, when I go now to my local host, that should be able to search only for one particular flight, no matter what search string I do it. So let's get back to this. And let's try again. Oh, there's something wrong in here. So it says that there's no array in there. Let me just check real quick.
Are you looking into the right object for data there?
Yeah, which is supposed to be right. So let me just go back in here and do flight data API. Maybe I'm actually destructuring the wrong one. So let me just actually do this. I told you the syntax for me is a bit off. So let's just get this. Data, list flights, and then it should be in here. Otherwise, just do data. All right, let's check it out. It's actually coming off as undefined. But I see the GraphQL in here. And the query is the same, right? List flights, items. Response is data, and then list flight. Let me remove this.
Just see how.
And let's do the basic one. Let's say I only got the data back. And then data has to be data in here. Nice. It's complaining about the response, but that's because it's observable, but that doesn't matter. Let's just try this now. So go back in here, do a refresh, and let's see. Now I got list flights, and then inside list flights, I have the items. So maybe I missed something. Let's try step by step. If that doesn't work, I forget about destructuring and I just go on. It's just because I'm stubborn and I want to make sure it works. So what do we do next? We got list flights. And let's see if that got any better, right? It took me a long while to wrap my head around. It doesn't seem like, oh yeah, of course. So I think this is wrong. Can anyone in the chat, I know the syntax is wrong. Can anyone in the chat spot the issue? Otherwise I would just carry on and just use dot and it should be fine.
Be our pair programming partners through Twitch.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on chat if someone wants to help with that.
Okay. So let's just actually, maybe it actually flight API. Let's just do, maybe what I missed was actually the variable assignment. I think that's what it is. That's right. Okay, getting better now. So that's what it is. That's what it was.
Okay.
So I have data, list flights, and let's remove this now. And in there I have items.
Needs to be an array.
And then in there I need to have data, which I'm gonna stop this now. And I wanna do this. So let's see if that works. It has to have a column without the brackets. It works.
There we go. Well done. Well done.
Okay, so we're halfway through. So that means if I go back in here, the GraphQL, same thing will happen. But now we are going specifically for only what's inside the array. We loop over the array, we instantiate a new flight class to get departure date, the right format, and everything else. And then we display. But if we try and now add a few more flights, we should be able to see more flights. But what I'm after is how do I filter this out based on what the user is actually after. Okay? So let's just do a few more flights. And let me just open up here. I think it was actually before. Yep, that's here. Let me just get another one. And instead, I'm just going to do 17. Same place. Probably 800 euros. You have money.
The 17th is much more popular day to travel, apparently.
All right, still back in January, but anyway, you should be able to get it. So let's try that and go back to our AppSync, and we can just do a mutation. No, let's try. What it is? Okay, I don't have that field. I forgot to remove it. So that's the nice piece about GraphQL, though. If it fails, it knows exactly what field, what was the property, what was the value, what was the expectation. So, like I said, this is live. That's why we're seeing all these issues. So hopefully we'll appreciate some troubleshooting as well. So let's go back there now. And if you just do a search again, now I got 2 flights. But the problem from the user perspective, I want them, if I put what the departure is, I should be able to get what the departure looks like. How do I filter that stuff now? Right? AppSync Amplifier already created all that stuff for me. How do I do this? Before I jump into the code and do it for you, I want you to learn how I learned. First things first, I need to do a query. And when I do a query, I do list flights, which you can see from here already. And when I do a list flights, I can pass the limit, say 2, and I can also pass a filter. And the filter here, there's something more complex in here. There's an input model. If I click in here, you probably recognize all the fields we have. So what we are after could be the departure date. And then we have a model string filter input, which mimics what Dynamo understands from conditions and filters. So now I can go back in here once again. And that was my common mistake. I always try to do EQ equals to, but what I want is all my flights starting on that particular date, no matter what the time is. So what I do is I do a begins with. And here, at least, I don't have to do another bracket because they expect a string. Let's go back down there. Look at the date. We care about the 17th, right? Let's try that. So if that works, all we need to do afterwards is to remember we need to pass what exactly do you want back. So we want, actually not this one, items, and now ID. Should have a single flight now. If I do a 16, I should be able to have a single flight as well.
Yep.
Okay, so that works. The beauty of it,
just real quick, it's also important to note that we're using begins with just because we've got string for the date. You could also do other comparators if you have different field types in the DynamoDB too. But just to keep it simple, we're using strings here. So if that's, just don't want to throw anyone off there.
Exactly. You have all the filters on the right-hand side in here. Yep. You can go and find out. So, okay, we got the basics. The beauty of this is we know exactly how this should look like. So what we do is, let's just copy this for now, even though we don't need it. We need to do exactly the same, but now in our code. So if I go back in here, before actually, in the GraphQL operation, I'm passing what the query should be. If I do a comma, that means I can pass my flight filter, which I don't have it today. So what I do now, I can say flight filter, and now I can create a new one. Right? And if I do this, which is actually should be an object, let's just fix this a little quick. Actually, I don't need it. So now what I have is I have a filter that will be passed along with my query. But that, again, will not necessarily write because I'm actually passing that as I'm actually hard coding it. If you look at the top, you see all of these red pieces. It means I'm actually destructuring, but I'm not using in my code. So let's just use that for now. So let's just use the date. And hopefully that will fail our query because the flights we added were in the past, right? So what we do now is we pass this, and let's try this now. And we're going to use the GraphQL network extension to troubleshoot that. So I got no flights, which is actually what we were expecting, right? So let's just go here. I see nothing. It's exactly what it should be. If I go to GraphQL, this is how I troubleshoot if I had to. If I click in here, you see the raw query. And at the bottom, you see the query variables. You see exactly what was passed. The reason why it doesn't work, we don't have the flight there. Let's see if that works now. And if it does work, we add a few more flights and we just make it happen. So what was the date again? That was 2019, 5, and then 1.
Also, don't forget to remove seat capacity.
Oh yeah. Good call. That's what I love about the live stream. You just keep on actually doing. Let's just call this like 20. And let's just actually do this now. If I go back to my console again, I add another one. And I should be able to get this, right? If I go back in here in search, now I see it. By the way, this is the cold start, right? So this is how cold start looks like. Isn't that horrible, right? That's the real user experience. I just wanted to call that out. So we can actually go and add more flights into this. But again, let's actually go in and probably do for tomorrow as well. So then we can see if that filter is actually working, right? So go back in here. That should be flight 2. And I have it there. If I refresh, I should be able to see only one flight. So that works. If I go back in here, because I'm only searching on that particular date, I should be able to see that tomorrow I want that flight. That was our cold start again, right? But we also need the departure and other pieces. We have about 40 minutes, so it should be enough to discuss that. So let's do that. So what else do we need? If we go back to here, we need the departure airport code, because that's what we're passing, right? So I'm just gonna take a note of this because I need that. Let me just remind. I'm actually passing the departure airport code and also passing the arrival airport code. So let's actually take these into here. So we have this, and then we pass the departure. And then we have this as an arrival. Same thing again. I pass the arrival.
When autocomplete does not help.
Like, oh my god, stop! Let's remove this line because that's confusing it more. So let's go back in here. It's actually uploading it. So if I go back in here into my flights, I can see everything's still working. But if I try, let's say London to Prague or Barcelona, hopefully there's no flight in place. So let's see if that in place is working. Do the same process again. Again, I know it might be dumb, but I just want to make sure you actually see it. So I'm just going to change this to PRG and then Prague, and then here Prague, and then maybe they'll call it Prague. I don't mind. So this is going to be called, and that's going to be cost us 100 euros. That's promo, right? Do 100 euros.
It's a cheap flight. Let's go to Prague.
Yeah. So the flight is on the 2nd of May. So go back in here and we add it, and I'm serious, this is live. Every time it works at least I feel more relaxed.
It's better when we have the right thing, that we can repeat.
All right, it's failing it, but again, we know what it is now. We forgot to get into the particular date. So I think it's the 2nd.
There it is.
Okay, perfect, cool. Where do we go from here? There's so many things we can go from here. We could even already start doing an integration test. We could do some subscriptions like we discussed before. There's so much that we can do. For instance, if you wanted to do subscription, let's say you are listing a list of flights for everyone, and suddenly you discover that the price flight is wrong. Happened many times. How do you update that and replace that automatically in your screen for the people who are using it? So if you go back to the GraphQL, you see the subscriptions. Remember the mutation we are making, create flight? We're clicking subscription, it's actually here. And instead of copy and paste all of this, I would normally create a new folder just for me, like say queries, outside what Amplify auto-generate for me. And I will make explicitly what the returns I want. I may want everything on that particular time, but if I'm actually showing only on the booking side, I don't need everything. I only need the ID. I only need probably where they're going, where they're arriving, the time. I don't need to show the price and everything afterwards, unless they want a particular piece of information. If they need, I make another query and pass only what I want. It helps a lot in terms of overfetching. You no longer have overfetching in that case.
And you also only have to build it once as the backend engineer. Anybody who's built a REST API has had the product team come back to them and say, oh, can we add this particular field? And then you have to pass that back even if the other clients don't need it. Or maybe you create this other endpoint that's a specific view for a specific model. And this prevents you having to do that as the backend engineer. It's so much faster.
Yeah. And actually even tapping on that, what I found the most, I've mostly done backends, and I always wanted to do front end because I was discussed on the episode number, kind of my weakness. I always wanted to do, but I didn't know how hard it was. It's really hard. That I tell you. But after a while, once you get to learn CSS, you get more comfortable with it, and you start with GraphQL, for instance, and a little bit of REST for areas that already make sense, you actually just get a mock of data, and you start playing with that already, which is super cool. So the way we actually did, and if Simon's on the chat, Simon helped me to do a lot of this stuff. So hands down for Simon.
Thanks, Simon.
You should definitely follow him on Twitter. He's awesome too. So if I go to, let me see. Actually, I didn't even need to go there. If I go to look up for flights.json, you see public mocks. You'll be able to see all the mocks in here. That's the only thing I use to build the entire front end. I essentially just built a query like you just saw it, and start querying that pieces on the back end and see exactly how that would look like, and realize, oops, I need to refactor some of that, added some pieces, refactor again, added another pieces, added more fields. It was only departure city, then I realized I need local for building the right date format. And when I went straight to the backend afterwards, I knew exactly what I needed to do, and it was so much faster.
Yeah,
that's something that helps a lot on the flow. So let's do all these changes now. We have lots of files in here, as you can see. We even have .graphql config, a lot of these pieces which I can explain to you afterwards. Let's just add all of this now. And we can even go ahead later and create another PR for episode number 2. So if you want to see us making a few documentation, a few enhancements, you'll see it. So let's just add everything here. And we just kind of add a new feature, episode number 2, catalog service.
By the way, I just have to say that I think you and Simon have been working a little too closely together, because everything you just said out loud, he typed in the chat, and it was like simultaneous. It was amazing. Yeah, all of this will be available as a PR on the GitHub, so you can go look and see what we changed today.
Perfect. So I just actually added that piece in there now. So in the meantime, that kicks off. Let's actually go ahead and create a PR. All of these resources that we're just discussing where the schedule, the links, and everything else, where the extension. If you missed if you missed episode number 1, all of this customizations from a laptop and everything else is here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy all of this, and we're gonna go ahead and create a PR. And whoever misses this episode, or if you want to go after and check yourself or try a few things, you should be able to do it. So let's just actually go to my repo. Actually, I have Mike. I don't want Mike. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, no, that's the wrong branch. You don't want the code that's in my branch.
All right, so let's just create as a work in progress, and then we just do an episode and then a catalog service. At least from here, you will know exactly what we've done, and you will be able to see the outline, everything we discussed. So let's see how that looks like now. Episode number 2, the recap we've done, the cognito, all those pieces, the custom fix we've made, didn't finish. Everything we've gone through from Amplify console, from push to sample branch. We actually were able to go through everything, which I'm impressed. It's not every day that almost everything works. We got a bit of an internal failure, which I don't know yet what it is, but it works. So here it is. So I will just make a few changes after this episode, obviously offline, tidy up a little bit on the code, but hopefully that gives you an idea on how we are progressing. Every episode we have a PR, you can go and find out how we've done it, if the mistakes were made, how we fixed it. If you are interested in how we fixed, let's go back to episode number 1. On the file change, it was something so subtle that I couldn't believe I missed that. It was something really simple. So if I go to, it was in the sign up fields. Here. We were trying to customize the sign up from the previous episode in Cognito. So once let's say you go to give you a better idea what it is, if you missed that. If I sign out now, and if I want to create a new account, I get custom fields, first name, family name, which I can use it. I couldn't, for the love of me, figure that stuff out from the previous episode. And what was missing was I had to pass another object called signup fields as an array, and then pass everything I wanted.
That's rough. How long did it take you to find it after the fact?
I think
It's okay. We're all developers here.
Yeah, I think I said, you know what, I will give it a try now, and it took me like 15 minutes. I couldn't figure it out. I enabled debugging. I was like, it's not Vue.js. It's not syntax. I can see the data being injected. I have no clue what it is. And then I thought, maybe I just ping someone, right? And then I was about to ping Richard, who works on the Amplify and also call stuff. I was like, I'm gonna ping these guys because they know the shit, right? And I was writing it. I was like, hey, I'm trying to create this custom field. I literally wrote the question, and I figured, I think I missed the field.
I know exactly what it is.
I went to documentation, and I clicked there. The link didn't work. So actually was I'm gonna show you now. It was here. So when you go to Vue.js, you have the authenticator, which was the component we used in episode number 1, and here you could customize, which is the sign up configuration, which you could see right here, right? Sounds easy. So I went back and I said, okay, so I click here and nothing happened. So it didn't work. By the way, have a PR in place for updating the docs. Don't worry. It's not gonna happen to you. And then I thought, oh, okay, this must be sign up fields. So I went straight to sign up fields and start adding all of these pieces, which basically I skipped the sign up fields object, and I start adding everything as an array. And I was like, why is it not working? And then from here, what I discovered was, if I go back to the authenticator and I scroll down patiently without all of my anxiety, I can see the sign up.
There it is.
Which has a sign up field, and I can even customize the header, the default country code for mobile, and all that stuff.
Overall, that's not too much time lost. I mean, we've all lost more time to a semicolon, I'm sure. So,
yeah, awesome. So we have 2 minutes left. I'm just gonna see if there's any particular question we want to pick and answer.
I mean, Julian and Simon have been doing a pretty good job of answering questions in the chat. Let's see if there are any that are kind of left over.
Or you can ask anything as well, Mike. Feel free to do it.
Simon's point. Yeah, there's one question. Why did you talk about cold starts if there's no Lambda? Is there a cold start for AppSync?
So if I go back in here, if I click on the backend, I can even see current cloud backend. When I click in build, when I say create flight, so this engine actually runs behind the scenes on AppSync, and that you still have to we have to make that call to DynamoDB to create the flights and everything else. So it's not necessarily a cold start like Lambda, which again we're gonna show in the next episode and the next ones. Which the cold start, when you see from a developer experience and development background, it may look weird or may take about 400 milliseconds a second or so. But once you get a show a real experience, you don't notice that. It's actually as fast as can be. As long as you have consistent traffic, and it shouldn't be. In this case, yes, it's going to be faster than Lambda in that scenario, but it also has limitations though. As you can see here, it's great that I can do everything using Apache VTL, but as soon as I start adding some complex stuff, spoiler alert for the next episode, and the second and the bulking episode part 2, we need to add some custom logic, and that's where Lambda wins. You don't want to use Lambda for just transporting pieces exactly as it is. It doesn't add any value. Only write code that adds value to your business. So in that case, even if you have to make a call to Dynamo, you still have to go to an intermediary step that will translate that piece, make the call to Dynamo, and respond. Even though some customers on Twitter were saying, yes, but you're going to have cold start, the performance could be bad, you can see now by yourself. Go to the serverless airline.serverless.dev and play around. You're going to see how the performance looks like in reality for customers.
Very cool. Let's do one last question.
Sure.
Because it's been asked a couple of times. People are wondering how you test those VTL templates. You know, how do you go about validating that you've written the right thing?
Right.
And then how do you do that on an ongoing basis in your CI/CD pipeline?
Sure. I may not have the best answer, so maybe the Amplify teams on the chat, they can answer that. The way I tried was I tried to use a serverless framework plugin for AppSync that has some local capabilities and such. It was kind of a try and basis there. but it didn't really feel great. I had to customize, track a lot of things. It was really hard for me. So what I ended up doing was I ended up literally going to AppSync. This was probably a well-kept secret. If I go to schema, because Amplify generated everything for me, let's look at mutations. And you see there's a resolver in here. If I click in resolver, I should be able to see a properly defined and tested mapping template. But let's say I want something else. I have a list of templates that I can use from. If I didn't deviate from this, I just used everything worked. On the next episode, we're gonna see some customizations in there, which suits our needs. That's where I had to create my own, publish in here, and test it from the console. I actually literally did this. But in reality, after trying this on a quickly basis, because it's really quick to test anyway, is primarily integration test. It's not something I would just unit test because it just doesn't work. In fact, we're gonna do this. We're gonna show you how to do integration tests for pieces that matter. And we're also gonna do some coding for Lambda, where we do some unit test code, and then we do integration test. And then later throughout the series, we're gonna do even end-to-end tests using Cypress.
Super cool.
Awesome. Everyone, we are 1 minute off, and I so appreciate everyone in here. Thanks for all the questions. I can't see the chat. I'm sorry, but if you know me, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate that. We love to see you in the next episode as well. And more importantly, Mike, thank you so much for coming, man.
Thanks for having me. I mean, you did all the heavy lifting. And also a shout out to Simon and Julian and the rest of the team in the chat that were helping answer questions along the way. It's kind of hard to monitor and talk and everything. So we really appreciate everyone kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah, there's a lot of heroes behind the scenes.
Absolutely.
So Chris Munn, Simon, Richard Boyd sometimes, a lot of people in there, even known in AWS. Thank you so much, everyone. And see you the next episode.
Take care.